Hello Year 12. So today's lesson of our AQA Psychology social influence topic is social change. So last lesson we focused on minority influence. So if we just go back a page in our book, we looked at the 3 things that we need to have an effective minority influence to create a change in the majority belief and behaviour. Now, some important things you need to remember for this lesson. So we have our snowball effect down here, and our snowball effect is one of the most important things. We cannot have any form of change without the snowball effect, else we won't be affecting the majority. So we won't be affecting the majority if we can't reach more than that one person. So that's why the snowball effect is really, really important. This is when one person gets converted and then another person gets converted. And this is called the snowball effect because if you had a large piece of snow as a snowball and rolled it down a hill, hypothetically, it would gather more and more snow and get bigger. I'm sure you've seen the cartoons. Another important one is our augmentation principle. So this is when people are paying more attention, because when more people are paying more attention and we're just increasing that majority group belief and behaviour. Sorry, if you hear any background noise, it is my family that I've told to be quiet. Anyway, so to today's lesson. So last lesson we obviously looked at social change. Last lesson we obviously looked at minority influence, which created a change in the majority behaviours. Now this lesson is based on a social change. So we're moving not fully away from minority influence, but we're looking at social influence as a whole instead. So social change, very important that you understand what this concept means. This is when a whole society, rather than just an individual, adopts a new attitude. So just for a moment, I want you to think about anything in the last few decades which has come about almost overnight. So obviously there will be people behind the scenes who have been working really hard to bring about this change, but for you as a member of society, it seems to have just happened. So my immediate thought is recycling bins. Literally, one day, we're all just throwing our rubbish away normally. The next day, everyone's got a recycling bin and people boo you if you do not recycle. Or maybe I was in a horrid neighbourhood. Who knows? So make sure you've got that example in your head. So I've got women's suffrage. So we've got over here our votes for women. Gay rights, that's a massive movement recently. Feminism is a massive movement. And environmental issues, so me and my recycling bin. So let's have a little look. We've gone through last lesson and now I want to give you the definition of our whole topic. So hopefully you remember this whole topic has been called social influence. So our main definition is the process by which individuals and groups change each other's attitudes and behaviours, which includes conformity, obedience and minority influence. These are our absolute key words. So social influence, all you need to remember is that it will surround itself around conformity, obedience and minority influence. If you do not know the definitions for those words, then make sure you've got them down. So I've got up here, you need to be careful about definitions. In A-level, they tend to have certain words which are essential. So for example, in a mark scheme, it may say, do not credit this word, or do not credit the use of any other word but this. So A-level, it's that one step up. You need to be really precise in your definitions. So, last lesson, we looked at how the minority can change the majority. Why is this different? It's different because we're not just talking about a majority. We're talking about the majority, society. And remember, society isn't the whole world. Society is a piece, well, it can really be anything. So our school would be a society. Our Britain would be a society. The European Union would be a society. So you need to think bigger scale. And also, we're not just focusing on minority influence, because remember, this is how social influence how social influences how the role of social influence processes in social change. So, like I've just said, we've looked at our definition. We need to include conformity, obedience, and minority influence. So, you've already got your example of one thing that has happened as a social change. I now want you to think really hippie-like thoughts, and what would you want the world to start doing? And it could literally be anything, like you really want people to all appreciate clouds more. You want people to appreciate clouds more. That is the social change that you want to come about. Maybe you are a tiny bit deeper than that, and you want mental health to be something that everyone talks about. That is the social change that you want to come about. So have a think, because if you have your own personal social change that you want to happen, then you can apply what we're going to learn today to your example, and that may give you a little memory cue for the exam. So, our definition for social change. So this occurs when whole societies, rather than just individuals, adopt new attitudes, beliefs, and ways of doing things. So examples include accepting that the Earth orbits the sun, women's suffrage, gay rights, and environmental issues. And we're going to look at 3 ways to achieve social change. You already know those 3 ways because I've hammered it into you. You've got minority influence, conformity, and obedience. So I want you to close your booklet, and I'm trusting you to do this because obviously everything I'm going to say to you is already written down in them, but I want you to completely focus on this video. Don't have anything else out. So, how does a minority achieve social change? An example that I'm going to use today is the civil rights movement. So this is a brilliant explanation as to how a single person then went into a rights movement group, and then they brought about the social change. So hopefully you can think of a few individuals such as Martin Luther King. We've got Rosa Parks. So these individuals are the ones that we remember, the ones that we think, yeah, they're the ones that changed it all. Excuse me. So there are 6 steps for minority influence only. So I'd love for you to guess these 6 steps. I've given you the first one. So we're drawing attention through social proof. So this basically means that we're showing people that there is actually a big problem. So if you're thinking back to your to the social change that you want to come about, so we'll take my mental health one over my cloud one, and you want everyone to start talking about mental health. First thing you're going to need to do is draw attention through social proof. So you need to show the world that people are committing suicide, and maybe they wouldn't do that if everyone just spoke about mental health freely and openly. So we're going back to our example of African American civil rights movement. So in the 1950s, there was black separation in all parts of America. Black neighborhoods, and in southern states, there were segregated schools and segregated restaurants. And the civil rights marches of this period drew attention to this fact. And also they used quite a lot of psychological research as well. So they looked at how segregation can cause mental health issues, make students feel like they're inferior to other people, and that affects their learning. So getting in that extra bit of empirical evidence will also help their case. So you're drawing attention. Next one. You'll get these in a moment. Consistency. So there were many marches and many people taking part. So we're keeping consistent with how often we're trying to draw the message, and there's so many people doing it as well. So even though there were a minority of the American population, the civil rights activists displayed consistency of message and intent. So say if I came to school one day and I said, hey, year 12, I want everyone to just start talking about mental health really freely, and that was the last I ever said of it, that's not going to bring about a social change. I need to march. I need to march every day, possibly before school, break, lunch, after school. I need to keep consistent with what I want, the message I want to get across, and what I want to come from it. So that's our second point. Thirdly, deeper processing of the issue. So back to this example, this attention meant that many people who had simply accepted the status quo, which would have been that there should be segregation and that black people were inferior in the 1950s, that is now starting to set off some cogs in our American society. They're starting to think, whoa, maybe I shouldn't have accepted the status quo. And they're starting to think about whether it is actually just. Is it right that that is our status quo? So you're processing it on a deeper level. And with my example of mental health, it's something that people don't like to think about. You say, if you don't suffer from mental health, it's quite a difficult thing to understand. And it will have been, in this example with white Americans, it's difficult to understand the inferiority of that black people must have been feeling at the time. So it's essential to have this deeper processing, which is our third point. Oh, which is why I've got a picture of the deep blue sea from the first scenes of Nemo. So, more. The augmentation principle. Remember, last lesson, we looked at this word. Augmentation means to make things bigger. Do not type it in on Google because it, well, you're probably going to type it in now. So, anyway, there are a number of incidents where individuals usually risked their lives. So if we're thinking about the African American example, even with Rosa Parks, when she sat on that bus, when she refused to go where they wanted her to go, she easily could have been taken to prison, beaten. They're risking their own lives for this one cause. And that's where the augmentation principle comes in. So people see that there is a reason why they're doing this. They're not just doing it for their own... they're not doing it to get something from it for themselves, because they're actually risking their lives and risking their safety. So that's how we get the augmentation principle. More and more people see that... that it's bigger than them. It's bigger than just the single person. So in our example, many freedom riders were beaten, and there was influence of mob violence. So there was, those people will have gone home with black eyes and got up the next morning and done exactly the same thing. And that shows that it's not just for their personal gain, it's for the greater good. Would really recommend this film. When I was in A-level, our teacher got us to watch it. I'm afraid we actually had more time in A-level back then, but if you can watch Mississippi Burning, it is a really good film to portray the civil rights movement. If you've already seen it, then think back to it. Number 5, our snowball effect. So, the civil rights activists such as Martin Luther King continued to press for changes that gradually got the attention of the US government. So like I said before, snowball effect is when you start off small, you're gathering speed, you're gathering more snow, and you become a massive snowball at the end. In this example, it means that when one person converts, the next person converts, next thing you know, everyone's got a recycling bin. Try not to get too confused with all of my examples. So we've got our example of Martin Luther King. If we looked at our example of mental health, more people would start talking about it, more people would have that deeper processing, which was our third point, and they would think, oh, maybe I should talk about it. So then they convert, and it just continues and spirals, and it's our snowball effect. And that's how we switch from minority to majority. Now, this is a really crucial time to say to you, to remember, keep linking back to what the question's going to ask you. So right now we're talking about how minority influence can bring about social change. You need to maybe even say it at the end of every paragraph and just make sure that you're keeping on point. And lastly, social cryptomnesia. I want you to think about this word first, so I'm just going to cover that. Mnesia. What does that sound like? Try and think of root words, other words that may mean similar things. Hopefully you're thinking of amnesia, in which